Okay, so now we're going to look at how to make graphs. And so we're going to look at the data table that we made back in making the data tables in Excel. And I want to make a graph of the average height versus the amount of aspirin that I gave the plants in this imaginary experiment that we're doing. So normally, if you wanted to make a table, or make a graph, I should say, you can just highlight the two columns, and if the two columns are next to each other, then you just drag and click. However, obviously in this case, the two that I want are on opposite sides of the table from each other. So I'm going to highlight this one. And if you notice, I did not highlight the words because Excel is going to then put that into the graph in a way that's personally I find very unappealing, just in terms of the way it looks, and unnecessary because I'm going to put other information in there it's going to have that same information anyways. So I'd rather take control of that. I'm going to move over to the other column. I'm going to hold the control key down while I click and highlight that one. So now it's just like when I highlighted the two columns next to each other, except now the two columns are separated. And I'm going to go to Insert. We are always going to pick a scatter plot, and we are always going to pick the one that has no lines on it. So I just want that guy by itself. I would personally get rid of the chart title. You could either click in here and then backspace it out, or I can get rid of the chart title right there. This is just a waste of space. We're going to put a caption on the thing anyway. So I'm going to click on Axis Titles. So I do want those. So this one was aspirin in milligrams. And this one is height in centimeters. Okay. You can play around a little bit with it. If you pull this down, you can stretch it out a little bit. This is kind of wasting a little bit of space there. But ultimately, in any graph that we make, we're going to want to put some kind of best fit line. So the way that I'm going to get that is I can just click on this, and if I click here, it will allow me to put in the trend line. I would avoid doing that though. So what I would do is just right click on one of the data points, and you'll see that it'll allow you to add the trend line. So it's going to bring up the menu. Let me get rid of this. Try it again. I want to format the trend line. And so now I have different choices. It's always going to default to linear. Linear looks pretty good for this, but I could also play around with other things. I can see what it looks like with logarithmic, polynomial. It also looks pretty decent. Power, they all look pretty decent. I mean, this data is relatively straight, and I don't have very many data points. So that's why I'm able to fit almost anything well with this. I'm going to go ahead and stick with linear. But there's a couple things I want to make sure that I add to it. It's going to be really important because it's going to make do some of the work that I need to know. And that is, first of all, I want the equation because that's going to give me the slope in this line. It's going to tell me something about how strong is the relationship, how quickly is the line rising, and I'm also going to display the r-squared value. One thing I'm never going to click on is to set the intercept. I'm never going to force my best fit line to go to some particular place. I'm always going to let the best fit line just go wherever it goes. So I'm not going to force it to the origin or to any other particular point. You can see in this case, this is saying that essentially the plants would have grown to be 34.5 centimeters tall if we hadn't given them any of the aspirin. And the reason I know that is because that's the y-intercept of this line. Now, one thing that you can do that I feel like is kind of helpful to just make it easier to visualize this is to extend the trend line. So that's another thing that I can do by right-clicking on the trend line, format it, and come back over here, and I can forecast backwards. So what I would like to do is to forecast backwards by 50, and that's where it's great. Now, if I was to go back by, let's say, 60, okay, so now it did a thing where it's showing me this part of the graph it feels awkward. So you could always, as I said, go back, change that back to 50, and it will readjust itself. And so sometimes you got to really think about how far is this data point and how far do I need to come back so the line either hits the axis or at least gets very, very close to it so people can visualize exactly where the y-intercept is going. You can see I move the equation down here. You could put it wherever you want. I don't think it's wrong to have it up here, but I certainly wouldn't have it obstructed by the best fit line. So I would avoid putting it anywhere near there. And personally, down here in the corner, either down in the corner or if I'm not going to put it there, then I'm going to put it up near the line where it's not touching the line, but it's close enough that I can look at the line and this at the same time to just make that connection about what the relationship between the variables is. I can still stretch this thing if I want to, and if you are going to change the size of it, I would strongly suggest that you want to do it in Excel. So if when you copy and paste it into your document, either Word document or your Google Doc, then if it doesn't look right or you feel like the size is not quite right, I would just delete it, come back to Excel, and think about how much you want to stretch it. You need it more horizontally, or do you want a little bit more vertically? Give it a little bit of stretch, and then copy and paste it. And I can copy and paste it by just clicking anywhere along the outside of the table, and then right-clicking and choosing copy. Or I can also go to Home and copy right here. And then I'll copy and paste that into the Google Doc or the Word document, and then just make sure to put your caption underneath that, and that thing is basically ready to go.